G'day. It is the 4th of July. After July comes August and then September. So we're about 2 months, maybe 2.5 months out now from the Canberra Chess Club Championship. And we got no time to waste. Let's try and prepare. We want to try and win this thing. So here we are with another puzzle streak. The aim is to get to 50. Now let's see what we can do. Wasting no time at all. We are black in this position. So settle in, let's take our time and let's get this right. Clearly, we can take this knight with a check, and if we do so, we'll be removing the only defender of this queen. So after he either moves the king or more likely takes our knight, we'll be able to take the queen. That has to be correct. Even if it's not, it's got to be good. And all right, we've got 1. Let's try and make that number into a 50. Now, in this position, it looks as though we can just take a free bishop, but if we do, he's going to take a free knight. If we continue the variation, we then have a check, forcing the king away and allowing us to win a rook on the other side. And that has got to be good. He doesn't want to let us take the bishop for free. So I like this variation. We're up to 2. All right, now here, this king looks super precarious. My first thought is, can we just swing our queen over here and provide a check? Because if I'm not mistaken, that looks a heck of a lot like a checkmate. All right, we're up to 3. Let's keep the party going. Now, what happens if we take here? He takes with the queen. It would be lovely if we could then land a knight on this square with a fork. But that's just out of reach, unfortunately. And as John Bartholomew, another chess streamer, will tell you, not just chess streamer, but really a chess educator on YouTube will tell you, a knight that's trying to get 2 squares away in a diagonal direction, that's going to take a long time. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm sure there's quicker ways to do it, but point is it takes a long time. So taking here immediately is probably not the right answer unless there's another response here, but I don't see it. If we use methodical thinking, we should really start with the checks first, and here's a nice check. Obviously, he can't come here because then we mate him on this square. And he also can't come here because that square is guarded by the knight. So this does force him here just by pure force. And now we've got the fork over on this side. So I really like that. Let's do that. And there we go. We can take a queen for the price of a knight, and that's generally a nice thing to do. We're up to 4. Again, a super precarious king, while our king looks very safe. It looks as though there's a queen on offer, but it is defended by the knight. There is also the option of just providing this check right here, and that forces him to come back. And how we then finish him is the question. How we then want to finish this is the question. I suppose then he will have given up the defense of the knight. So we could just come back with the queen and gather up a free knight. So check, he moves back. Thank you for the knight. We're still threatening this pawn here. All sorts of trouble. Anything else here to consider? If we do take the queen and he takes back, does that make things better or worse? Probably no better. I do like this check to start with. Is there anything else? I don't really think so. Why not just win? Why not win a knight, right? We can win a knight and we still have this huge attack against the king. We can't possibly be worse. Is there any kind of mate here? I mean, here we can not really force the queen trade. Let's just take the knight. We're up to 5. All right. Now in this position, things are fairly closed in the center, but we've just got a passed pawn as a result of this. So what happens if we just push that passed pawn? Because after the knight moves, we'll be able to push the pawn again, and it's going to be on a square. A, it gets a tempo on the queen. B, it's going to be on the 7th rank and menacing to become a queen at some point in the future. And C, it's going to be defended by our bishop long range. So we could just push through. Where would the knight go in that case? The knight would have to go not here, because that's not going to work. Could come here once the pawn moves up. Could come back. So there's options for the knight. But, probably doesn't want to come here actually, because then when we push forward and we fork both of these guys, we're going to win material. So that one's kind of out of the question, actually. So really, it's either this square or this square once we push forward. And regardless, if he chooses, say, this square, we can push forward, hitting the queen. The queen's going to have to move. Then this queen can just come up here, take a pawn with a tempo on the knight. Not quite, because without the knight here, when the queen comes here, it'll actually be defending the pawn. So maybe we should take the pawn now. Does that make this threat stronger? Well, maybe, but it also leaves the knight here, and that allows it to defend this square, which allows this move by the rook, which attacks our queen. Our queen can move here and take this. Although, now that I look at it a bit more closely, if we come here, even though the knight defends this square, he can't put a rook there. Why? Because our long-range bishop would snatch it off the board. So maybe we do just simply take this pawn. We can simply take this pawn. We preserve this threat. Now where's the knight going to go? It can't come here. I guess it can still come here to be real, but then we've got this move hitting the queen. So I really don't think he wants to do that. Although if he just moves, yeah, we take the knight. So this does seem a little bit hard to deal with. What if he preemptively moves the knight there? You know, something else has just come up to me, and again, here I am fumbling around in all these different variations, spending lots of time, and if you've been watching my channel, you know my time management is an issue when I play chess. I need to be thinking methodically if I'm going to learn anything from players that are better than me, and the way to think methodically is about the violent, dangerous moves. Let's start with the checks. Here's a check right here. Bishop takes d5, check. Why don't we just start with that? We win a pawn, we also fork the rook. That just seems outright good. So it doesn't really matter where he goes with the king, because at the very least we've got a rook here, and I'm just going to take it. And there's 6. So that one took me way too long. Let's try and be more methodical as we go. So yes, the queen is under attack. We don't have any checks available, but captures we do have some. We can capture a bishop and leave our queen, because afterwards we get to take this queen with a tempo on the rook. So once the rook moves, we'd take the knight. However, he doesn't have to move the rook straight away. So he takes queen, we take bishop, he takes queen, we take queen, he inserts knight takes knight, check. We take the knight back. Then he saves the rook and attacks our pawn. There, let's say we castle and he takes the pawn. We have 2 minor pieces, those being the bishop and the knight, and 2 rooks. Whereas at that point, he's only going to have 1 minor piece and a rook. So I think there we're just simply winning material. He can give up the queen like this. We take. That was a different variation I didn't calculate, but the one that I was most scared of is what I calculated, and it turns out to have been a good idea. Now, here we can come with the bishop, and there's a beautiful little pin there against the queen. I don't think there's anything you can do about that, so there it is. Has to give the queen up for a bishop. All right, we're 8 in, and we need to be doing better. Now here I can actually take this pawn with a check. King can't move anywhere because the bishop's guarding that square. And if he takes with the pawn, which is forced, then this queen can jump up here and provide a checkmate. So that's a mate in 2. All right, now here, any checks, because we want to think methodically. There is a check here. That forces him to come down to h7. From h7, we don't have much, but there's also a check here. So this is better methodical thinking, because now when he moves, we can swing back and take this rook. At that point, we're simply up a rook. That's got to be really good. Cannot be bad. And we're up to 10. Look at this centralized king dying to be checked by a rook. Bring this rook into the game. The only problem is this bishop here prevents that from happening. So there's other ways we can provide checks here. One of them, which is really nice, is with the knight. Why is it really nice? Because we also fork the queen. If we win that queen and he takes the knight back, we're going to have 2 rooks versus 2 rooks. We're going to have a queen versus 2 minor pieces. This is really good for us. Let's go. We're up to 11. Okay, he's pushing a pawn. He wants to make it into a queen. In the meantime, how are we going to stop that from happening? Because we've got two connected pass pawns right here ourselves. So if we can subdue this pawn, we'll probably be able to get a queen up here. So we can maybe subdue it with this move. By the way, there's no checks. There's no checks and there's no captures here. So that's why I'm looking at things that are not checks and captures. But if we just play this bishop c5 move, bishop c5 prevents him from playing a7 because we simply take on a7. He doesn't have any checks against us either. So that's a nice thing. If we play this, he could play a move like, for instance, knight e6, attacking our bishop. But our bishop can always just drop back, always preventing this pawn from advancing. Or for example, even coming here so that there's not even any checks. If he provides a check, no, we can't take because after he takes back, he's going to push this into a queen. So we do need to stay on this a7 to g1 diagonal, I think. So if we come here, what's he actually going to do? If he comes, trying to find a way to support this square, maybe that would be like this. So if we come here and he goes there, looking to support the square, even that probably doesn't matter because we just start pushing this pawn. And if he does push this pawn forward, we take it. And if he takes back, we push again. And if he starts bringing his king up, we jump our king up. If he brings his king up further, we jump our king up further. If he starts bringing the knight back, we push this guy. We're going to end up with connected pass pawns. I think this is going to be the way to go. He brings the king up immediately. I probably will do the same. Maybe something like this, but that drops this pawn. Any move of the king really drops the pawn. So maybe now we just move this, get this pawn rolling. If he does that, we can always come here. And if he does that, we can come here. So I think this is going to be okay. Cool. All right, so that was a bit of a tricky one, and maybe I even needed to spend more time, but we got through it. Let's be methodical. Here's a check. There's a check. Everywhere, a check, check. Now, what happens with this check? He has to move over here, and then we can come up here and provide a checkmate. The alternative is that he blocks with the bishop. And if he blocks with the bishop, I can actually take straight away because this pawn cannot capture back because it's pinned. So this is a mate in maybe 3 or 4. 1, 2, 3. We're up to 13. Let's keep the good vibes going. We've got a pawn. Why not push it to b6? What would he do about it? What would he do about that? I would like to know. We can also just simply take here on h7. He's got these connected pawns, which could be a bother. But I like this idea. If he tries to come and attack our rook a little bit further, then we can take on h7. Or in fact, if we really wanted to, we could even leave the rook where it is and just push this pawn again. Because if he takes the rook, we get a queen. And that should be really good for us. So actually pushing this, his king is not in time to prevent the trouble that he's in. He's going to have to use the rook. So let's say he brings the rook over here. Well, we can still just push it further. We're defending things. And then we want to, the simple plan, even if he starts pushing his pawns, is we then want to put our rook here next to our pawn. And the threat would be to go check and then get a queen. So I think that's going to be the move. Let's push it. He goes there. Let's push it again. And from there we would be okay as calculated. Now, in this position, there is a check here and here, but it looks as though it just gives the queen up for free. We could cut this queen out of the game through a move like b6 to allow this check. Then we would also be threatening not only check, but to pick up the bishop. So b6 may not look like it, but it is a threat to the bishop. We do have to be aware, though, that if we just play b6, he's going to play this move, threatening both our rook and to become a queen. So after b6, e takes f7, we can play check. He's just going to move out of the way. And then if we just take this bishop, he's going to take our rook with check. We take back. And yes, we are attacking this rook as well, but the rook gets to now move. It does now get to move. And that could be problematic. So I don't love that. So instead, what about this check? This check looks nice because now we're threatening the king and we're also threatening the queen. And it's a check, so he doesn't have time to take here. So we go check. If he does anything like this, well, that doesn't help his cause at all. We simply take. And so that's going to be the move. Now we can take the queen, and we have far too much material to worry about him taking over there. Now, in this case, we can actually, here's a check we can start with. We can start with check, and the beauty of this check is, if he takes the rook back, he drops the queen. And we've still got a bishop here as well, so we're doing fine. In fact, we're doing it excellently. If instead he moves the king to the side, well, then our rook comes here with a check, and again, we're going to win that queen. So thank you for the queen. We're up to 16. Let's keep this going. Now, in this case, I see that this check forces him to capture for all intents and purposes. I mean, he could take this knight instead, but no, he can't. And this is the beauty of these checking moves. They're violent and they force a response from the opponent. It doesn't allow him the option of taking our knight. No, you're checked. You must deal with the check first and foremost. But after you deal with the check, this nasty knight comes in with another check. And what's going to happen after that, after I've checked and forked all the rooks, is I'm going to capture one of those rooks. And I'm going to capture that rook with a tempo still on the other rook. I'm going to have this outside pass pawn. Is it good enough though? Is it good enough? So check, he takes, check. Where does he want to go there? I mean, let's say he comes back. Well, okay, then I can take here. And it's a rook and a knight versus a rook and a bishop, but it's 3 pawns versus 5 pawns. So that is a lot better for me. And it's going to be that way no matter where he goes with the king after this check. So that's why the puzzle there has finished. This pawn is pinned. This pawn is pinned. And that's the first thing I notice. This is an undefended rook. So how about this for a move? How about e4? e4 attacks the knight. And that knight doesn't have a lot of great options, really. It's really only safe square is back here. He can't take with the pawn. He could take with the rook. He could take with the rook, but like I say, he's going to drop this rook here with a check. And I'm going to happily trade any day of the week. I'm going to trade a rook for a pawn. So let's do that. He moves the rook out of the way. Well, fine, but why don't we just take the knight now? Because that was the secondary threat. Was simply to take the knight. There's no big threat down here, so thanks for the knight. We're up to 18. Here, it looks like we can almost provide checks, and we can, technically speaking. But the downside of providing those checks is that he can simply take the queen in one way or other. So instead, can we start with a move like this? Check. If he takes with the bishop, he gets mated on h1. So he can't take with the bishop. Meanwhile, check. If he takes with the queen, he gets mated on h2. So he can't take the rook. He could block with the queen, but we simply take that, and then we don't even need to calculate because we know that's exceptionally good. And the other option is he drops with the... So this is just a forced, he's ruined kind of a sequence. If it wasn't mate, we could take the rook at the end of the line as well. We're 19 in. Let's keep on going. Now, our bishop here does look a little bit out of place at first glance. But what else is going on in this position that needs to be factored in? Any checks? Are there any checks available? No, there are not any checks available in this position. Nor actually are there any captures available in this position. So we got to move down the line to the threats that we may have at our disposal. And one threat would be bishop c5, a very natural threat, developing a piece, preparing to castle, but also threatening to simply win the knight. So what does he do after that? Well, since he's got 2 pieces trained on our c6 pawn, he would probably, in that case, want to take it. Let's say he takes with the queen. If he takes with the queen, well, we take the knight. But then he takes the rook with check. So we don't love that. Let's have one more look. So if we come here, he takes with the queen. We could take with our queen. But then he jumps in here with the knight. And we don't love that either. So I don't love that because this poor pawn ends up in a bit of a pickle. So what if we push this pawn, and in that way we create the threat against the knight? We allow it a trade of queens, but we can take. And where does the knight then go? It doesn't actually have to go anywhere. He can provide a check first. And our king, I don't love how open our king is. Just in principle, I don't like that very much. And at the very least, the knight has safe squares to go to. So I haven't yet found what I'm looking for really in this position. Is there some other crazy threats? Like, can we threaten the queen? I don't think so, because he simply takes in one way or the other. What if we move our knight away? That might be another way to attack his knight. Okay, so we bring our knight here, attacking the queen, and also attacking the knight. But again, I think the same response of queen takes pawn. We can't take the knight because the queen's pinned. And if we take his queen, he takes back. I suppose there we can at least take his bishop. So that's one nice thing, is we're not only attacking the queen, we're attacking the bishop and the knight all at the same time. Okay, so if he uses the queen to take this pawn, as mentioned, we take the queen, and at that point in time, okay, once he takes back, he's won a pawn, but then we win a bishop there, and this knight isn't going to be doing any more damage, so that essentially just wins an exchange. If instead he tries to take this knight, well, we just take the queen. So this is working. We take and we take. All right, we're up to 20. We're doing pretty well. Let's keep it going. This is a very vulnerable king. This queen is hanging on by a thread in terms of the defense, but we do have a check right here. And since he can't block with the rook without just losing the rook wholesale, he's going to have to, if he wants to, just move the rook, the king over this way and allow us to place a rook up here, or even maybe even more forceful than that after the check and he comes here. Maybe we can come here, directly threatening to take the rook with checkmate. And if he instead takes our queen, we give this check, forcing the rook back, taking the rook, and it would be a mate. So after this check, he comes here. What's better? This move with the rook, which also threatens mate, but allows the queen to come back and defend. Or check, he comes here, we come here. And that's a move I really like, because now he can't come back with the queen. If he does, what do we do about it? I originally thought we just take the queen. We take the queen because if he takes with the rook, again, we're going to mate him. So we'd have to take with the pawn, at which point we can take this pawn. But there, he's got 4 pawns remaining, just like us. I don't see that that's so much better for us. So this is a little bit of a tricky situation. After check and he comes here, what about we put this rook here? Putting this rook here really does prevent his queen from coming up, because then we snap it off the board with our rook. It also still threatens to take his rook with mate, and it also preserves the old idea that if he takes the rook, we're going to mate him, but this time with the queen. I like this a lot. There goes our streak, bugging it up. Let's see what we did wrong. I really thought we had that one in the bag. Let's try and work this out. What does he do after rook f2? Maybe he's got options of playing these moves to defend the rook. So even if we take the rook, he just takes back. So, but I don't see how that's any different after we come here with the rook. Because if we come here with the rook, once again, he can defend that rook in a variety of different ways. And so what do we then do? I suppose then, not in every case, but in some cases, no, okay. I get it now. So if we come here, obviously he can't take because we take back and it's mate. If we come here and he comes here, here, or here, well, then we come here. And he can't take because he's pinned. Okay. So he can't take the queen. And he can't take the rook because, again, we take. And then even if he brings the queen back, we're going to take back again and mate him. So either of these three moves fails because of queen f2. Queen f2 becomes unstoppable. If he brings a rook here, that's mate as well. And if after this move he comes here, which was the move I think I was afraid of, well, then I take. Then I do take with the queen. And he can't take with the rook because the rook is pinned. And if he takes with the pawn, then we take the rook. And now we've got everything we need. All right, new streak. Let's go again. We've got another half hour here. Unfortunate, but that's the way the cookie sometimes crumbles. Now, here's a check which looks a lot like a mate. All right, in this case, there's an easy check right here. And once he moves, we've got a mate. So those ones have been quite quick to start. Here's a check. And once he moves to the only legal square, since he can't come here, there's also this check. And that's actually mate. So these ones have been relatively more straightforward. Here's a check. He can't come here. He's forced back here. And then there's a mate. So we've got another mate in 2. Here we've got a check, but he does have the ability to take. We've also got a check up here, and that's just a mate in 1. All right, here, well, we've been checked. So what are we going to do about it? We actually can't come to any of these squares. He's white, so he's going towards the 8th rank. So I could come here, here, or here, basically. That's the choice. Now, this one's out of action because his bishop's on that diagonal. So really the question is here, here, or here, or here. Where do you want to go? I mean, instinctively, you'd think this is the best move because are we not just going to win this on the next move? Let's see. We come here. He moves his king. Let's say here. We take. If he continues just moving his king in, we take here. We're defending this pawn. It might be a draw, but we're not going to lose. It would have been good to maybe spend more time on that as an endgame study. But in the meantime, let's continue our tactics training. We can take that. We can also give a check here. We should start by looking at checks. So this check looks nasty, really nasty, because the only thing you can really do is allow a mate in 2. All right, so we're black. It looks like he's got lots of defenders around the king. And we've only got this little combination here. However, that's all we need when you've got queens lined up with a bishop in between. If you've been watching the tactics series, that's going to come quite naturally. Here he's forking both the bishop and the queen. But what's he missed? He's missed that there's a check. And that check is going to force this, and then this, and that's actually mate. All right, we're doing nicely here. Here we need to continue. We've got a check. He can't take with the king. He has to take with the rook, and that allows this check. And there's no defense to that. So I'm happy to play that way. Straight away, we're back to 10. Now we're black. It looks like we can take a queen. He's going to look to take our queen as well. But what do we have in reply to that? That's a good question. Something else we can do here is we can simply take the bishop. Supported by the pawn, we're attacking this queen twice. And if the queen moves off the diagonal, we win the bishop behind it. So I don't see really how that can be too bad of a move because we're going to win a minor piece. Wow, so he gives up the queen. He's not a bad move. Then going to get a pawn and an exchange for the queen. Now, we need to move on. We can take this, simply snatch this off the board. He can't recapture. We are threatening the rook. And we're also threatening to take here with 2 pieces. So this is kind of looking like a free piece. The problem is he can take with the knight. So I think what we want to do instead is take the knight, which also threatens the bishop. Okay, so once we take the knight, I'm not afraid that he might take the bishop back, because A, that's an even trade, and B, we follow up by taking another bishop, which is not an even trade, that's in our favor. So I'm not afraid of him taking. I'm not going to spend more time on that. What if he takes this bishop? Well, if he takes that bishop, I take this bishop. And again, so far, that's an even trade. The only problem for him now is I'm threatening to take a rook, and I'm also threatening to take a bishop. If he moves his rook to such a place as it also attacks my bishop, well, then I can take this bishop, he can take this bishop, and then at the end of that, you'll see actually that I'm still got 1 extra minor piece. I still have 1 extra minor piece. So take, he's got 2 minor pieces left. Take, I've got 2 minor pieces left. Take, he's got 1 minor piece left. He comes here. I take, he's got 0 minor pieces left. He takes, I've got 1 minor piece left. So this is the move. What he might want to do, so this is the move I was not afraid of, because I simply take here. Here's a check. Here's a check. Here's a check, but he simply takes. So really we're looking at these two. And this is the better one because it also defends the pawn. So pretty much just without further calculation, we can play that. Although obviously in a real game, I would calculate that just to make sure. Now here there's a check, which also wins the queen. So I'm happy to play that. All right, now here, interestingly, we've only got pawns. He's got a knight. So this is an interesting sort of endgame scenario. How do we proceed? Well, we might just want to play king b4 and try and take these pawns and get a queen. What happens if we do that? It's going to take him, as we know, a long time to get to this pawn because it's 2 diagonal squares away. He can come, to this square pretty nicely. He can come to this square where he's attacking this pawn. But in the meantime, we're going to take this. So he takes this. And then we're going to take this. And then he's going to come here. So 1, 2, 3, 4 moves it takes him. But by the time he takes this, we're pushing. And he can take this, we're pushing again. He can come up here, we push again. He can actually sack the knight there. We take. And then he can start pushing these, but we go here, 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 here. He also gets a queen. Whew. Look, I think we basically have no other choice though. So just as a matter of principle, we have to do something. Now here's a check that wins a queen, so I'm going to play it. Do I want to add in anything else in the meantime? No, let's just take the queen. All right. Here we are, we're playing as black. We can't take the bishop because we're pinned. We could not castle because that would be against the rules. Can't castle into or through a check. But we can do something like this if we want. We can also, let's think methodically, we can provide a check. And the nice thing about the check is it's also a fork on the bishop. Let's do it. Let's win a bishop. Ooh, but let's not do it because we're going to lose the queen. Let's not do it because we're going to lose the queen. So what will we do in that case? We could play this check and win a knight. That might be a nicer way to go. And in fact, after playing this check, the question is, where does he go with the king? Because he has to go somewhere. He can't block it with any piece. So after we provide this check, okay, he can't come here because of this check. And the reason that's nasty for him is once he moves, we then take the bishop. So if check, he either moves forward to this square, but that loses the queen because of check. So really, he's going to have to go, and that's going to be the case. Even if he comes here, it's still check by the rook. Yeah, so he's going to lose the queen if he steps onto this file. Okay, he's going to lose the bishop if he steps onto this diagonal. That only leaves this square. And after he uses that square, boom, we take a knight again with check. That can't be bad. Let's go. All right, now here there's a check like this. He can take it, but then there's this check. And that's more than just a check. That's a mate. All right, here there's a queen promotion possibility. But he simply takes twice. It might be better to put a rook up here first, giving a check, pushing him this way, and then getting a queen. Because then if he wants to take, we take back, he takes, we take, and we both still have a queen, so I don't love that. I think after this check, if he comes here, I'd rather come here and just finish the job there with a mate. Which means that if we do come here, he can't allow this. He actually is now going to be forced to take. And after he takes, we're going to play check. He's going to take back, so that's also something I don't like. So instead of all those things, why don't we give this check? Pushing the king away. Pushing the king away. Once he moves away to either of these squares, we can actually provide what's called checkmate. We don't actually even have to do that. So that was nice. Now here, looks like there's a forking opportunity here, but I guess this square is well defended for the moment. We could add another attacker to that square by taking the knight. But let's be more methodical. Let's think about our checks. There is a check right here. That would draw the queen onto this square. Is there a benefit of our queen being on that square? Of his queen being on that square? Not particularly, but there is a benefit now I'm realizing of this knight getting the hell out of the way with a tempo. Moving out of the way as quickly as possible. Because with check, doesn't matter if he moves the king or if he takes the knight. Comes in the checkmate. So check, mate. All right, now again, a scenario where we have pawns versus pawns and a knight. Now, we have to move real quick here. We really have to move quick because if we don't get a queen, we're lost. If we do something like this, he simply takes. And what was the point of it? If we do something like this and he takes, well, then we can push this pawn. And then, let's say he takes this pawn. Then I push this. Now he has to take, but then I push this, and I think I'm going to get a queen. So I actually do think this is the move. And then this. Unfortunately not. I got the first move right, again around the 20 mark, this time 19. Got the first move right. If we just go back one move, what would he have done if I push this pawn forward? That was my original plan. I mean, I guess on the face of it, you could ask, why not take the pawn? And, you've got these connected pawns which have the same idea. After he takes, you can still push. And if he takes, you can decide what you want to do. I think in this case, I would push forward so that I get outside the square that his king can enter back into. Whereas if I were to take this pawn, well, I guess his king still can't catch me. So I see that. But what I don't see is why this was a problem. I thought this would still work with the same sort of mechanism. If I play this, he can't take because I could do this. Maybe he has time to start moving his knight back into the game, but I really didn't think so. So let's just see a bit of help now from the computer. That is best, but what's wrong with this? What would he do? He'd move the king in. Activity of the king in an endgame. Doesn't go for the pawn. That was my error here, was worrying about the pawn. Now, I don't need the computer anymore. Now that I know that idea, I can look at it. My thought was that after I push, the move I was most afraid of was king takes pawn. Because I thought, well, he's then going to take this pawn. He's going to have connected pass pawns and a knight. The only real question is, can I make a queen after he takes the pawn? And I suppose here, yes, I can, would be the computer's suggestion. And indeed, yes, the computer says, for sure, in this line that you calculated, you're correct. You can make a queen. And you're winning. That's not the problem, though. The problem is I overvalued this pawn. Again, Black's in a scenario at the moment where they've got a knight. They've got a whole extra knight. So they don't need another pawn as well. All they need to do is literally restrict the only thing I'm trying to do, which is get a queen. And this is really an interesting learning point, because if I were black, I might have been tempted to take the pawn too. Whereas you have to understand what the source of counterplay is for your opponent. And here, as black, your opponent is white, and the source of counterplay for white is, can I get a queen? Either through this move or through this move. Now, if we play this move, black says, well, they're trying to get a queen. I need to get my king back to sort of defend. I need to keep my king within this square. So the king comes back, and all of a sudden, that source of counterplay I thought I had of trying to get a queen has just evaporated. It's just completely gone. No longer can I get a queen, and therefore no longer do I have any chance of winning this game. He's going to use the knight to round up the other pawns. He's going to get a queen. It's all over. Now, of course, if black doesn't play that way, if black does get greedy and goes, I'll take the pawn, well, now my source of counterplay is alive to the point where, in fact, I win through either of those two moves. Now, the difference is if I take this pawn, firstly, I've taken one of his pawns off the board. Secondly, I've connected these pawns. So now even if his king comes back, I still have hope. I suppose here I would play a move like this, get my king active. Computer says no, but let's see what happens. No, definitely not. Man, endgames are difficult. Endgames are difficult. So here, that would be wrong. You'd actually have to push this immediately. And we're threatening to just take and get a queen. If he takes, I don't think we can just take back and allow him, this kind of opportunity. Although maybe we can. Maybe we can. Maybe it's some sort of a draw here. No, black's definitely winning. So you can see how easy it is to go wrong. Let's use some help here, because this is ridiculous. So we can't take that. We've figured that out already. But if he comes here, we push, he takes, and we push again. And look at this for a construction. He can't come up here because our pawn guards. He can't come here because his own pawn's in the way. And because of that, no matter where he goes, even if he tries to come closer to the pawn, he's now outside of the square of that pawn. And we're going to get the queen after all. That was really hard to see. That was really hard to see. And it doesn't work like this because he comes in, we do this, and he can take with the king. If he did take with the pawn, well then yes, same sort of construction where he can't get through. So that's a construction worth knowing. But we take, he would come back with the knight, trying to get the knight back in the game. But again, we push. He's going to have to take back. His king now is relatively useless, so we push. He tries to get his knight back in time, but it just never does actually get there. And we do end up getting the queen. This would still be tricky. You got to make sure you don't get forked by the knight. But there you have it. Look, let's do one more. We've got 15 more minutes. And we want to try and maximize this time because I want to win this tournament. That's all there is to it. So this is a mate in one. This is a check and then a check. Here we have a check and win a queen. Then we have a bishop versus a couple of pawns. This is looking like, what have we got? We got this check. This check could be something, almost looks like we might have some sort of forks on offer, but we don't. We do have this check as well, and that's actually a mate. So I'm going to do that. Here we've got, again, I'm trying to be very methodical to some extent. We've got this check. We've also got this check. So after this check, what happens? The king has to move, or he just comes back. If he comes back with the queen, then we take here with a check, and we follow up with style. So I don't think that's going to be the move. So check, he moves the king to one of these squares. Then we can pin the knight, perhaps. He can provide a check. We take, he takes, we take wouldn't work for him. So yeah, this pin there would be nice. So check, he comes here. Maybe then what we can do is even take the knight immediately. He can give a check. We come here. He brings the queen in check. We come here. He brings another check. We come back. He brings the rook in check. Now, I don't like that so much, but that doesn't mean I don't like check. Or even check, so I can stay on this diagonal. Has the same effect of moving the king onto this diagonal. So after check, he moves. We come here. There's two attackers on this knight. There can easily be a third. I like that. Wrong. Had the sort of right idea. But I thought here, it's hard for me to bring another attacker to the knight, but it's not that hard. You just drop back. In fact, you do it with a check. Whereas, what's the issue with doing it over the other way? What's the issue with doing it here? Check. He drops. I didn't think that was super scary. But the reason it wasn't scary from here was because I could take this pawn, right? So like here, if he comes back, yes, I take the pawn. So that's not really very good. All right, I'm really tempted now to leave this video here and leave this training session here, but too bad. You don't get to give up because it's hard. We got a competition to win. Let's do it again. Let's just take a bit more time. Now, if we take the knight and he takes back, we can take the opposition. And since this pawn can't move, and this one can't move without being taken, this one can't move without giving this one up, he's going to have to move this pawn. And then we can just play a waiting move ourselves. And now he's out of pawn moves. He's going to have to move the king. If he moves the king this way, we come this way, and we're going to infiltrate. If he moves the king this way, we're going to move that way, and we infiltrate. So this is a winning endgame. All right, so here's a check, and then there's a pawn at the end of it. Not a pawn, sorry, a bishop. He can't actually come towards our king after the check, nicely enough. And because the bishop here cuts him off, the pawn cuts him off, the rook cuts him off, it's actually a checkmate. Here there's a nice fork, and we win a rook. Here there's a mate. That's not quite mate, actually. Check, he'd have to come here, then check. He has to come here, then mate. Here we can obviously take the queen back if we want to. Is there anything better? Is there a reason we wouldn't do that? Not that I can see. Why would we not want to take this? Because he's going to have a check. Is that the problem? Well, we simply move out of the way of that check. We're threatening the knight, so I don't really understand. Ooh, I missed that. I totally missed that fork, which isn't very good, but I can come here. And if you take my queen, I take your rook. Okay. Got lucky on that one, which isn't very nice. But it is what it is. Now, let's try and be a little bit more careful and a little bit more deliberate. Okay. He's piling up pressure on this file. Doesn't look like there's much there for him to munch on other than giving away his queen and rook. So I'm not really that worried about that. I'd love to give a check here, but I obviously can't. So why don't I just take this pawn? It seems unattended. I'm then attacking the rook. I'm also attacking the knight. So if I just take this, he needs to defend the knight. Probably has to bring it this way and then drops the rook anyway. He doesn't really have any other big threats, so I'm going to do it. And then, yeah, I'll take. All right, so here is white. Why don't we just simply take the rook? He takes back, we take, and we've got a rook versus two minor pieces, but we've also got a pawn that's about to become a queen. We could even push that forward straight away. We could go here, here, here. If he tries to take this pawn, our rook comes across. So yeah, I think that's going to work. Yes, we're temporarily down material, but that rook's going to help us get another queen. Speaking of queens, in this scenario, our queen is under fire. But really not to worry, we simply take the bishop. If he takes back, we take back. In that scenario, we've got all four minor pieces. He's only got three. And I think that's just a beautiful position. Another possibility here would be to take the bishop with this, but then he takes the rook with a check. So I'm just going to take like this and say our position's solid and good. Now, here we can think about taking the knight. It's one thought. Because he can't take back with the knight, for he would drop the queen. So he would have to take with the rook. Then we can also take again. But then he takes like this, so I don't think that's really it. We could also jump the knight up. That could be a nice move because we're attacking the queen. He can't take with the knight because, again, we take the queen. And we're also then threatening to take this knight. And it's hard for him to take back with this knight because this guy falls. So, again, just way too quick. Didn't actually properly think about it. What happens if we do take this? He takes this way. Well, here I thought we would have a check. And we're going to win the queen back. But, okay, so he takes back. I would take the queen. He takes back, presumably like this. And, okay, we take... Ooh. Nasty. Nasty, nasty. And we're just down a lot of material, but what if instead in this position here, yeah, let's do something like this. Bishop's a goner. Take, take, take. And it's just too much for the queen to deal with, unfortunately. Too much for the queen to deal with. All right, that'll do. No, we're going to go one extra bit. Not so much puzzles. There is something I want to do, though. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that I've got the ability to checkmate my opponents with a knight and a bishop. So that's what I'm going to practice. Knight and bishop mate. All right. So introduction. The first step is to restrict black's king. We're going to only do this for 5 to 10 minutes to one of the green triangles we see on the board. We'll control the long diagonal of the triangle with our bishop, and we will control the necessary dark squares using the king and knight. All right, and keep in mind what we're trying to do is push the king towards one of these corners. Now, these are light squared corners, and that's because we have a light squared bishop. You have to keep that in mind. If we had a dark squared bishop, we'd be pushing towards the dark corners. All right, so what we're going to do is, this is the first triangle. We're going to put a bishop on that triangle, leave it on the triangle, and use the king and knight to push the other king towards one of these diagonals. Fair enough. All right. Then there's going to be a second triangle, but before we can transition our bishop to the second triangle, so we could maybe say that this was the first triangle, and the second triangle would be this. And then the third triangle would be this. And we're going to slowly triangulate him in there. But before we can do it, we must further restrict the black king by taking away the f8 square. So we can't allow him to escape from this triangle by leaking out of the corner, let's say. So we got to block the leak with our king, keep him in here. All right, so we play something like this. And now we have to play a waiting move. And again, we play another sort of a move. So he's still within this triangle. Now we need to invade that triangle with our king, whilst our knight holds down the fort. He goes back. Now we can't invade further, so we play another waiting move. So there's lots of waiting moves involved in this kind of thing. Black's area is shrinking, so he can't come in still. So we come here. And now he's going to have to go over there. Now we take the opposition. He comes here. If we play bishop a4 now, yes, he would come here and escape. So we always have to look for those leaks. Can't let him have that. He comes here. He still can't play bishop a4, obviously. But we can come here, and now he's forced this way. We can come here. He's forced there, and boom. We've got him into the next triangle. Slowly we're going to get him now. This is a kind of difficult thing to do, isn't it? Now the knight doesn't have to cover b4 at the moment, so this is the perfect time to re-maneuver the knight to the perfect square for the second triangle, which I'm supposing is going to be this square, but I don't know. Get the knight to the perfect square for the second triangle, covering b6. Now the knight must go back to push the king. Don't want to let him out. So we take this square. We wait. Look, this is really complicated stuff. I'm going to stop the video. I'm going to do this training on my own, but thanks for watching, and this has been the 4th of July. We're going to bloody well train hard, and we're going to get there. See you next time.